Hello everyone, welcome to Kalam's answer writing session for the day. So it's been quite some time since we have introduced this program. So the basic idea of this program was to help you all get rid of the fear of answer writing. I think we have made some progress on that front. Okay, so today's question is on internet, and because we have spent enough time on evolving subheadings whenever we read a question, today we have made some mistakes when we have written the answer. It is not a big mistake. The answer that has been written will fetch good amount of marks, but then the idea is to get the best marks. So what is the classic problem that people face? What is the classic mistake that people do when they write an answer is what I'm going to point out, and that we will see once we get down to the answer, once we get down to the sample answer. Now we will, as usual, read the question. I will read this question on internet as a fundamental right, and then I will evolve the usual introduction, body and conclusion format. Under body, I'll evolve the several subheadings that we do, and before I do that, I'll talk about the prerequisites when I answer these kind of questions. What kind of question is this? Is this basically a hardcore polity based question? See, internet has become an integral part of exercise of other fundamental rights. So all this comes under the fundamental rights section of our constitution, and you have to talk about certain things when you address questions on that arena. What are the prerequisites? One is the usage of articles. And you have to mention the names of the articles, and if possible detail it down and talk about article 19.2, which calls for reasonable restrictions, and 15.4, 15.3 and so on. So all these nitty-gritties will fetch you more marks. So the basic thing is always to address the concept. So these are basically value additions. Prerequisites are something that are important. When you put in your answer, is going to give you the best amount of marks. So one is the usage of articles, and the second is the establishment of logic. Because polity is basically a very conceptual subject, it is important to write down certain conceptual terms, conceptual logics. Like for example, this question starts out by saying internet has become an integral part in enjoying our fundamental rights. Elaborate. So I have to establish how internet becomes quintessential for the exercise of the rest of the fundamental rights. And how do I establish the logic between the two? I have to think about it. See, internet is important for information. I open the internet, I get to know what is happening in the world, and with that I get empowered. Information is empowerment. Lack of information is basically disempowerment. So when I have this empowerment of information, I'm going to exercise my right of freedom of expression, which is basically article 19. So that is how I've linked article 19 to the right to internet access. That is one way. And the second thing is, internet is important for budding entrepreneurs and the payment systems and so on, because everything is online these days, phone pay, UPI, etc. and etc. So right to internet access is also important for the occupation of a person. So that is how I am establishing a link between internet and the fundamental right of occupation. Okay, so this is how you have to establish your logics when you talk about your answer. So using these logics, you will be able to connect yourself with the examiner. So these things are important when we write an answer. Having said that, we will move forward, read the question and then evolve the subheadings. See, internet has become an integral part in enjoying our fundamental rights. You have to elaborate on this. This is the first part of the answer. Do you think right to internet should be declared as a fundamental right? Justify your opinion. Okay, so I definitely have to talk about few things. I'll start from the below. I'll have to talk about, yes, it has to be a fundamental right of internet. And then now that I've pointed out that it has to be a fundamental right, I have to balance it out by talking about certain concerns. Like for example, internet gives you the opportunity to stay anonymous, and anonymity is a bliss, and using that anonymity you can always misuse your position, because you can't be traced so easily, and that will impinge on the rights of the others. So that is one concern. So basically you have to point out concerns in order to balance your answer. And before all this, I have to talk about the link between FRs and internet access. So the first theme is basically going to establish the link between different fundamental rights and their link to the right to internet access. The second thing is to talk about why internet has to be a fundamental right, and then I move forward and say that there are concerns with having internet as a fundamental right. So I will conclude with one or two line conclusion, which is basically midway between the two. And what is the midway, we will see when we look at the sample answer. Okay, so we'll start with the introduction. What is the introduction? There are different ways of starting the introduction. There is world over a movement which is calling for right to internet access as a fundamental right. In fact, you have Scandinavian countries which have declared internet as a fundamental right. They've also given criteria or parameters for the internet speed. So and so internet speed is important and that is necessary and is a part of fundamental right. इतना detailing हुआ है बाकी जगह में. So in this slide you can talk about internet as a fundamental right. That is one way to talk about your introduction, establishing the fact through world scenario. Second is the current affairs approach. How do you approach it through current affairs? There are so many shutdowns in the country, and if you look at recent reports, the newspaper reports have told us that India has become the biggest country in terms of internet shutdowns. This is basically a really difficult idea to digest, given that we are bastions of democracy, bastions of freedom of expression and rights of people. So this has become a really big factor and it is being debated world over and also on the national platform. So in this context, right to internet access becomes a really important right. So that is how you can introduce our answer. So how do you introduce your answer? One, through the world scenario, and the second through the current affairs approach, and then you move forward to write your answer. So this is going to be the basic framework of your answer. Now we will move forward and see what this person has done. Okay, so before we look at the question, before we look at the sample answer, I am going to prima facie tell you all the mistake that he has done. Sometimes it is difficult to segregate your points under each of these subheadings because you don't have a point which can come under this or this. You have a point which can come under this and this, or you have a point which can come neither under this or this, but then you still have to write under either of these things. So it becomes really difficult. So what people do is they basically merge these two things. Merge the points, write 8 or 9 points on a single subheading. Okay, while that will give you decent amount of marks if you put out good logic and so on, but segregation is important. Why I'm telling this is segregation tells the examiner how compartmentalized your mind is, how much clarity do you have about these topics, and how you are able to generate your points. So we'll get to that once we look at the sample answer. I've already told you what the mistake has been. So we'll see what this person has done. He says Article 19 of the Constitution provides the fundamental right to speech and expression. Right to internet can be a derived right because it provides us with information which can be essential in exercising our rights. So this is basically a decent introduction, and in fact he started out addressing the first part of the question, which talks about the link between right to internet and the other fundamental rights. He started establishing the link through the introduction itself. Okay, so that is something that I want you all to notice, and he has mentioned Article 19, which is a good thing. This is a decent introduction. Now let's see what he does. Reasons to declare right to internet is a fundamental right. Which subheading was this in our structure? It was supposed to come after establishing the link between right to internet and other fundamental rights. Now what this person has done is that he has given those points also under the same subheading. Now when you merge your points under a single subheading, it gives out a signal that this person has written too much under under one theme, and he probably didn't answer the other theme altogether. This gives that impression gets created because an examiner is not going to spend so much of time reading your answer, maximum of 50 to 60 seconds maybe, and in those 50 to 60 seconds he is not going to put his brain in your answer and decide whether you have or have not addressed each part of the answer. So it is better you put it out clearly, you segregate your subheadings clearly so that the examiner gets to know. That was the classic mistake that I wanted to point out. Now that is out of the way, we will see what this person has done. He says that it provides us with information, awareness, avenues for expression, which are all connected to a life of dignity. So this is basically a point under theme 1 of our answer, because he is trying to connect Article 21 to right to internet access. Good. Next he says states like Kerala have declared it as a basic human right already. Now declaring it as a fundamental right is basically a logical extension of what the state has tried to do. Kerala is known for its very very people friendly policies. In fact, it has the separate policies for disability, it has policies for transgender. In fact, it is the state which has first come out with these with these policies, which these egalitarian policies which try to create an egalitarian social order. So once we have states which have these kinds of movements in which right to internet is being considered as some kind of right, human right, basic right, whatever it is, so it is imperative upon the national government to convert this into a fundamental right. Okay, so this is basically a point under theme 2 of our subheading. So what do I mean by theme 1 and theme 2? This is theme 1 because this is basically the first subheading of my answer. This is theme 2, this is basically the second subheading of my answer, and this is theme 3 in which I have to talk about the concerns. Okay, so you basically merge these two things which I didn't want, but this person has done it, it's fine. I just want to point out that there is a reason why you have to segregate your points, because it will give the examiner a good understanding of what you have in your mind. Not what does he say? Scandinavian countries have made it a fundamental right, including speeds of internet, etc. Okay, this is what I've talked about. And then it is related to various fundamental rights like right to privacy, Potoswami judgment, right to education, because internet gives you massive opportunity to learn as much as you want. There are so many open courses. If you're looking at higher education, there is NPTEL, there is CDeep, and then there are several open courseware of different countries and different institutions all over the world. All of this is possible through internet. So right to education basically gets guaranteed by right to education gets guaranteed by right to internet. That is what he's trying to establish. Then right to privacy and so on. This is basically again a theme 1. So basically he has written points nicely. These are nice points, you should have segregated. That is what I'm trying to establish. That is the thing I'm trying to drive home. Okay, what does he have? Declaring it as a fundamental right. Declaring it as a fundamental right will improve government citizen connect, citizen centricity, etc. This is under theme 2. Can help break gender divide by empowering women. This is good because women basic specific rights and the institutions they could go to in case their rights get violated, etc. will all be possible if they have information via internet and so on. And then he also talks about internet helps in economic growth by boosting the startups and so on. So basically he has given 7.7 very good points, but some of these points belong to subheading 1, which tried to link internet access and other fundamental rights, and some of these points belong to second subheading, which tell me the need to declare fundamental internet access as a fundamental right. Okay, so far so good. The problem has been pointed out. Now the take home is, I want you all to go home, segregate these points under different subheadings. Under the different subheadings we have evolved. That is going to be a nice exercise, and that is going to tell your mind how to think in terms of subheadings. Okay, otherwise what happens is you end up mixing your points under different subheadings, and then the subheadings lose their relevance. That is what I'm trying to point out through this answer. Now then he has established that internet has to be a fundamental right. Now he moves forward and points out the concerns. What are the concerns? Anonymity, because it hurts privacy and the peace of the others, because it could destabilize government through mobilization. For example, for a long time Jammu and Kashmir protests, etc., they have been occurring through WhatsApp and social media and so on. That is one way of destabilizing the government. And then there was this rage of ISIS for quite some time, 2 or 3 years ago, and us time pe there were several lone wolf attacks which were basically radicalized by this ISIS. It was said so. Okay, so that is another way of destabilizing the government. So any protest can turn into a violent format. In order to turn violent, it needs mobilization. To need mobilization, they need coordination, and to need coordination, they need communication, for which internet is a basic good avenue. So that is one way in which there is a concern of declaring it as a fundamental right. So it becomes a case where government gives out this right to people, and then it is giving out such a right that can destabilize it. So this is basically a catch-22 situation. You are damned if you do, and you are damned if you don't. Okay, and then move forward. Once provided as a right, it becomes really difficult to curtail it, because then the judiciary is not going to keep quiet. You have declared it as a fundamental right, and now I'm going to do anything you do it against it will be ultra virus. Okay, so that is what is going to happen. And then there is digital divide. Provide internet access providing it is fine, but then do you have the infrastructure to do it? अभी तो डिजिटल डिवाइड इतना ज़्यादा है. देयर इज़ भारत नेट, देयर यूज्ड टू बी नेशनल ऑप्टिकल फाइबर नेटवर्क उसके पहले, अब भारत नेट के बाद नया पॉलिसी आई है एंड सो ऑन. सो दीज आर बेसिकली ट्राइंग टू प्रोवाइड इंटरनेट एक्सेस टू ब्लॉक पंचायत टू ग्राम पंचायत, so that the digital divide between people gets minimized. Before this target is achieved, if I give right to internet access, I have to justify it, because people, they would then go to court to get these services. Do I have the resources as a government? Do I have the infrastructure? First thing, do I have the money? Second thing, to create such elaborate infrastructure to provide this as a fundamental right? That is another concern, right? So he has pointed out good concerns under different angles: anonymity and once provided as a right, and digital divide. So these are good points. Let's see how he ends with the answer. Thus countries must first gather necessary infrastructure and institutions like BharatNet, digital literacy, etc. BharatNet has been modified now, by the way. Only after this it can be declared as a fundamental right. Okay, this is a good conclusion. Overall, this is a decent answer if you ask me. But the point is, he merged points, and there wasn't any clear segregation between first theme of the question and the second theme of the question, which he should have done. Okay, so that is my only contention with this question. Otherwise, this is a beautiful answer. This has been addressed well, and that should be all for the day. I'll open up the question for tomorrow, and after this I'll just mention happy Sankranti and I'll leave you all be. So let's see what the question is for tomorrow. Tomorrow's question is on human rights. So this is another question which is related to GS2 and rights. Okay, so this is basically based on an article which talked about the need for human rights being balanced with duties, and the possibility and the cases in which a state can curtail these human rights. Okay, so we will read out the question and we will evolve the introduction, body and the conclusion format, and then we will see how to improve upon this. I want you to think about this particular format. So absolute sovereignty over human rights is an outdated concept in the 21st century. Discuss the statement with regards to the government's stand over the criticism it has been receiving over some of its recent acts. Okay, so this is a beautiful question. There are several moves by the government which have been come under the scanner for quite some time now, for the past few months. Abrogation of Article 370, and then the discriminatory citizenship, supposedly discriminatory Citizenship Amendment Act. I use the word supposedly because I can't outrightly criticize the government, whatever my personal values are. I am writing an exam in which, if selected, I become a part of the state, so I cannot outrightly criticize the government. So you have to modify your tone when you do it. Don't take an extremely activist stance, and this is going to backfire, and how? Very badly. Okay, so that is something that can be written in this answer. Absolute sovereignty over human rights is an outdated concept. So the government has been coming up with several policies, like I have mentioned, and these policies have been questioned, and in response the government has said human rights have to be balanced with duties. Human rights have to be balanced with the idea of national integrity, unity, security, sovereignty of the state. Okay, so that has been the government stand, and anyway we will see to the points under these different subheadings tomorrow, and that should be the discussion for the day. You go back home, the first thing you have to do is segregate the points above. There are 7 points written here. I want you to segregate these points under the subheadings we have discussed. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and if you have extra beautiful points, please feel free to write them down. That is the first task for today. And the second task is to evolve this structure. Think about this structure, evolve introduction, body and conclusion, and we'll get back tomorrow. Okay, and happy Sankranti. Have a good time with your family if you're spending time with your family. Okay, and even otherwise I want you all to have a good time. Okay, thank you.